Let us bow together in prayer. Dear God, we thank you for your presence that sustains us and defines our purpose and our journey. This day we honor the life and enduring legacy of your servant, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His story reminds us all of the high cost of the freedoms that we currently enjoy. Dear Lord, we thank you for our guests for this occasion, whose calling allows us to be better informed about the world in which we live. At times, their work places them in harm's way and on the threshold of history. We appreciate their service. Now, Lord, to hear and the wisdom to know how to respond. This is our prayer of confidence in Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Such a special time where the life of Martin Luther King Jr. but is instilled in generations of people regardless of race, class, or demographic. It is also amazing to see how King's legacy has become a global understanding, where he has influenced people like Zulia May, the Afro-Colombian activist, or Aya de Leon, the Cuban revolutionary hip-hop poet. I had the pleasure of having dinner with Reverend Vernon King, son of Martin's brother, A.D. King, and King's sister, Dr. Christine King Ferris, at my grandparents' home several years ago, and was surprised by their perspective, not as a civil rights icon, not as a resounding minister and scholar, but as a brother who loved to cook pancakes and cherish his time with his family away from the struggle. And remember, when we celebrate the work of King, to always include those women who worked tirelessly beside his side. Coretta Scott King, who many may not know, was an accomplished trained opera singer. Diane Nash, Rosa Parks, and so many others who sacrificed equally for the movement. So again, let's not use this day in this program to learn, but to also glean and rethink on how we view ourselves and others to time a better for others. Thank you.
Good morning, my beautiful little sisters. Good morning. My name is Kiara Mcmillan. I am a sophomore journalism and media studies major from New Jersey, and I'm super excited to introduce the panel that here we have a group of journalists that are here to talk about their experiences in reporting and documenting of communities' progresses in social justice, and what it's like to see a movement through the eyes of a reporter. You know the saying, the revolution will be televised? Well, these people help televise, print, and spread news. We have Alan Johnson, the editorial page editor for the News and Record paper. Mr. Johnson graduated from UNC Chapel Hill with a Bachelor's of Arts and Master's of Arts in English and Journalism in 1979. He's part of the National Association of Black Journalists, and he's also part of the National Conference of Editorial Records. He's written pressing and thoughtful pieces on things concerning and affecting the community of Greensboro for his column and blog in the News and Record. With over 30 years of experience, Mr. Johnson is also a part-time college lecturer and a full-time review hub. Next, we have Michael Hewlett, the Courts and Legal Affairs reporter at the Winston-Salem Journal. Hewlett graduated from Washington and with a Bachelor's in Journalism in 1996. Hewlett has reported for the News and Record, Lynchburg, City Hall, and now the Winston-Salem Journal for a span of over 15 years. Mr. Hewlett has experience in writing feature stories and hard investigative news that cover local government and education and topic-wise. Michael loves pop culture and is a movie enthusiast. And we also have Wanda Stark, an anchor from WXII 12 News. Wanda has been in journalism business for over 35 years. She's graduated in Richmond with a Bachelor's in Journalism and Speech Communication, and she also went to graduate school in Howard. Ms. Stark then began her career in Georgia. Since then, she's written and anchored from Greensboro to Los Angeles to Buffalo, where she became the first African-American named day anchor. Now Wanda has been at WXII 12 News since 1994, informing viewers in the Triad area about its happenings locally and nationally. And just like our other panelists, Wanda also has an affinity for film, being that it's her dream to play an anchor in a movie. May I introduce you to the panelists, Alan Johnson, Michael Hewlett, and Wanda Stark.
you all for being here. We truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We're not facing all of the same civil rights issues of the 60s, but we've seen images play out on television and the newspapers that look eerily similar to those found during those times, like in the new movie that's out now, Selma. Today, I would like you to share with our students how covering, reporting, and writing about the issues that resonate with you personally. Would any of you mind sharing how your newsrooms decide how to cover some of these stories on the local level when it comes to modern day civil rights topics like immigration, marriage equality, and police brutality? And we can start with you, Mr. Jefferson.
Should I use the mic, or?
I think they can pick you up.
Okay. Well, first of all, good morning to everybody. It's an honor to be here. And I'll start out by saying that we try to cover these issues thoroughly and sensitively, and we don't always succeed. Part of the challenge is particularly covering issues that we have blind spots on. Race certainly is one of those. I would also say recent issues involving marriage equality also have presented some challenges for us. So part of what we do is to try to address blind spots by having a diverse group of people to discuss how we're going to cover the issue. And if we feel that's not enough, we invite people in from the community to get a better feel for what we're dealing with, whom we need to talk to, things we need to watch out for, and that helps us. Bottom line in being consistent in the quality and the accuracy of what you do is hiring a diverse staff so that you don't have as many blind spots. I always tell my students, and we talk about it, I say, what if you had a news organization that was all female? Would you cover males fairly and thoroughly? And my students say, of course, or they would try. But there are certain things that in your life experience as a female, you would not understand about the male experience. We had a news organization that was all male. No matter how hard we would try, and I know as a male, and my wife reminds me of this regularly, there are things I just don't understand, and things I just don't see because I haven't lived a woman's life experience. And so those kinds of things are important, to have those different voices. And if you don't have those different voices, to seek them. I think another question is going to come pretty soon about some other issues, but I'll kind of preview the discussion to say that when we talk about black men now unarmed black men being killed by police officers, I am a black male, and I have had experience with police officers. I believe my voice at the table informs that discussion in a way that a white male's voice could not.
I feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I'm never in the meetings when they make these decisions, but I will say overall, I think all of the decisions are pretty much based on 2 or 3 factors. If there's public interest in it, if it's event-driven, if there's something going on, if there's a march or there's a news conference, if people are talking about it, we're getting people about it, and that's generally how I think they decide whether they're going to cover an issue. That you brought up, Selma. I saw the night, and I just thought back to when I first started. Well, my first interest in the business was when I was in elementary school, when all of this was playing out. And I remember sitting with my father, watching the news every night, and he would say, you need to pay attention because this is history. This is history. And I guess what saddens me now is although we've made remarkable gains, and certainly when I was in elementary school, there were no people on television who looked like me. Now you see people of color, all over the place in newsrooms and delivering the news. But it saddens me that some of the same issues that were covered in the 1960s we're still talking about today.
I think I'll piggyback on what Alan said. you know, we need to have discussions. I think that a diverse newsroom is always important, and so that you have different perspectives, make sure that you're not missing blind spots. And I think it also comes down to just good reporting, and sometimes when we cover these issues, I think one of the most important things is trying to find the content. That comes through having discussions, and it comes through reporting, like reporting thoroughly, talking to about everyone you think of, and reporting the issue.
Have either of you had to interject your perspective when covering some of these issues, or if you're starting to see a gap in the way that you're covering, so probably what you're about to say about police brutality?
Well, I can go back even further, and this will date me quite a bit, but when I started out at the News and Record, there in the morning news meeting, when I was in the news department, I was the only African-American editor at that meeting. And this is where I date myself. We were going to do a 12-year project on the class of 2000 that was graduating from Guilford County schools. So that was obviously in 1988 when we were going to start this project. We were going to do it for 12 years. I will also date myself by mentioning that in those days you actually held photos in your hand and you saw the photos that you were going to be using in the next day's newspaper in the news meeting. Well, the photo editor had, so again, to explain this project, we were going to follow kids from when they were in grade until they graduated in Guilford County schools and tell their stories. And they posted the photos of all the kids on the bulletin board in that news conference room, and every one of the kids was white. It's hard to believe that now, given that the Guilford County schools enrollment is majority minority, so to speak. But in those days it was not. And I sort of raised my hand like this, and I said, well wait a minute, you know, what are these pictures here? And he said, well, these are follow for the next. I said, well, white kids. And their response, and I don't exaggerate this in the least, their response was, they didn't think, it was dramatic, but they didn't think about that. I think they would have figured that out maybe later in the day, or hopefully later in the week, or somewhere within those 12 years. But that was an egregious oversight. And it wasn't top of mind for people. And again, this is not an exaggerated story, it actually. And so it's important to be there to point some things out. Now, on a very briefly, on a more subtle way, a less dramatic way is when we talk about dealing with the police. Often, particularly as an African American male, I can tell stories and I can have a little more insight as to what our experiences have been with the police. Because I've been stopped by police for being black. My neighborhood, when I lived in Winston-Salem, I was walking in my neighborhood twice and got stopped by police for walking and asked where I lived, which may be 5 minutes away. Apparently I was perceived as someone who did not belong in the part of town I was in at the time of night I was there. And this happened to me twice. I was stopped while driving twice. Actually 3 times. And so I was asked by the police officer what I did for a living. You know, those kinds of things should not happen. And because I have personal experience with that, I think that lends some insight into when you're covering that issue. First of all, you know it's a legitimate issue. You know that it actually happens. And second, it gives you a little more empathy and insight when other people talk about their experiences that you can relate to. And it helps other reporters when they hear that kind of story, when they're going out to cover this issue, it may not have happened to them, but they understand that it can happen, and it happens to people from all walks of life, and that it's not always warranted. So I think that life experience, again, helps shape the coverage and helps inform the coverage. You don't want a preconceived notion or prematurely drawn, because every time someone says they were brutalized by police, it doesn't mean every complaint is justified, but it does inform and it does open your mind what does and does not happen.
I have not had that kind of experience. I can tell you that living in Los Angeles, my husband was stopped by the LAPD twice, and the second time he was stopped, police officers drew guns on him, and they said that they were looking for someone who had robbed. We lived in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood at the time, and the person, he could hear the description going out on the two-way, and the person they were looking for was over 6 feet tall. My husband was 5'10". The person was wearing blue jeans. My husband was wearing khaki pants. It was just entirely different. And, you know, like I said, this happened not once but twice. And the second time that it happened, I called the watch commander at the police department and said, you know, what is this? You know, he says, well, you have to understand that, you know, anybody who goes out after 10 o'clock is a suspect. And he actually said that. And it's like, are we living in the United States of America? But I think that was part of the mentality that there are 40,000 gang members in Los Angeles, so any black male who goes out after 10 o'clock in a predominantly white neighborhood is a suspect, and that was the mentality, so.
Yeah, I would have a problem with that. I'm a night owl.
Oh, yeah. I would think anybody would have a problem with that. It's not normal, you know?
I haven't had that particular experience. I mean, usually I get pulled over because my tags are expired. Every now and then I forget, you know, it happens. But I've had other experiences, and I think all the experiences that you have because of who you are, because I'm a black man, they inform the kinds of, I'm not an editor, so I'm a reporter, but they inform the kind of stories that I might do, the kinds of stories that I might see, the kind of questions that I might ask. And again, that's the reason why I think diversity is important, because again, you have those blind spots. If you don't have a diverse workforce, there are stories that you're going to miss because, well, if everybody thinks the same or everybody has the same experiences, then they're going to only see certain types of stories.
Thank you. There's been a blending of roles in the media where it's getting harder to distinguish the straight journalists from the pundits and commentators. Lately, more opinions are being woven into newscasts, which can confuse viewers. I would like to get each of your perspectives. First, Mr. Hewlett and Ms. Stark, and then Mr. Johnson, since you're an editorial editor on those blends. Get the mic for you guys. Sorry about that. That's
Blending, I think that's definitely an issue, and I think that one of the problems is I think people nowadays tend to gravitate toward news organizations that that align with whatever their point of view is. If you're a conservative, you go to Fox News. If you're a little bit more liberal, you might go to MSNBC. So I think it's disconcerting because you know, the role of journalism is to inform the public, to give people information so they can make whatever decision they need to make. And we have to be very careful about you just getting one particular source. You have to get it from a lot of sources.
I would have to say, as a TV journalist, one of my biggest disappointments is that with cable news, once we went to 24-hour news, that we would have more news and there would be more stories being covered, that they would go beyond what you see on the evening newscast, and instead what you have is a lot of opinion. And I think opinion is good, But my problem, even with the opinion, is that a lot of times instead of people sharing ideas, it's not an exchange of ideas, it's just people on one side and people on the other side, and they're just shouting at each other, and there's no thoughtful discussion. And I don't think it helps to, I think as journalists, our duty to inform, enlighten, and inspire. And I think that we're failing to do that.
Because I'm the guy who, all I do is write opinions. That's my job. My sections are the opinion pages in the News and Record. And the challenge there is to communicate clearly to the public what's opinion and what's news. We have a news department and we have an editorial department. And philosophically, never the twain shall meet. They're separate. They operate separately. We don't write news, and the news reporters don't report opinion. But the line gets blurred more and more because we do have reporters who blog. We do have reporters who tweet. And sometimes opinion can seep into those posts. So it's very important that we are aware of that and that we address it when it does, or that we make it clear what the rules of engagement are when you're posting things online. I do think that there's a problem with people going only to places where they feel comfortable. And so my advice to you, when you consume news sources, is to consciously make yourself go somewhere where you know the people, the views that are presented, you'll disagree with. I like to do that because it challenges my way of thinking. It gets to a place and it makes me think about things that I didn't think about before. And one of the things I do as an opinion editor is I like to, in our section, we have the newspaper's opinion and we have the opinions of us as columnists. But we also solicit other opinions, particularly from people who disagree with us, because that is a robust form of ideas. That is where people challenge each other, and that's where some of the best thinking comes. So it's important not only to discuss opinion, and it's also important when you present different opinions to present diverse opinions, and as a consumer of news, when you seek opinions, to seek diverse opinions. One final thing I would say is when you're out there looking for news, you ought to go anyway. I don't think there's any better news organization than the New York Times, and I think it's a good place to start for getting facts about the news. Now, the New York Times is a liberal news organization. And some people, well, I'd also mention the Wall Street Journal, and people say, well, the Wall Street Journal, that's a conservative news. They're liberal editorial in their opinion pages in the New York Times. They are conservative editorial on their opinion, very conservative in the Wall Street Journal. But I put their news coverage up against anybody's. It's very good. So I'd start with some of those reputable news sites to get the facts. Then if I were you, I would go to an opinion site where I know, well, I'm going to see some opinions that I agree with. And then I'm definitely sure to see some opinions that I disagree with.
And just, you were talking about social media. I have a professional Twitter page. I know that there have been some controversies about, journalists or people who say that they're journalists who post some controversial stuff. I know that for me, I'm very careful about what I post on my Twitter. Usually I'll just post interesting stories. I usually post my stories. I think it's really important for news organizations to have a very social media policy in regard to their news departments and making sure that every employee knows what's allowable, what they have to be careful about, what they have to be conscious of. Just want to add that.
Thank you, guys. All right. We're winding down here. So the last portion of this program is an observance of the MLK holiday. which is known as a day of service. I would like each of you to share with the audience how you give back to your communities through charities, organizations, or volunteer efforts. We have many students in here right now who need community service projects. So here's your some helpers.
Well, one of the things that I feel particularly strongly about is black males, and that black males get the support and the encouragement and the exposure to role models that they need. So I participate a lot, and I've been on the board of Big Brothers Big Sisters in this area. I don't know if any of you are big sisters or any of the men out there are big brothers, but it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, where you serve as a mentor and a friend with a young person. And sometimes all you're doing is just talking to them or listening to them talk and sharing time with them, but it's so important. It fills a void in their lives. And they need to see people who look like them, who are successful, who are doing some things they may aspire to do or they may never have thought about aspiring to do until you presented the possibility to them. So I like Big Brothers Big Sisters a lot, and I've been involved in that from my days in Winston to my days here in Greensboro. I just think it's a fine program. There's a program called Communities in Schools that I've also been involved in as a tutor. I've been involved in that at Lincoln Middle School and in a variety of elementary schools, Hunter and Jackson Middle School. And again, you're providing that role model. It blows my mind, some of the things I see in the schools. It also helps me as a journalist. I see things that I never would have thought about writing about until I just saw them firsthand. I've seen students say things to teachers that are inconceivable, that were inconceivable to me. I've seen a young lady in a middle school class curse her teacher and call her demeaning names, and that's just something you don't expect to see or to hear. And I've seen police have to be employed in a middle school to deal with disciplinary issues, and so things like that you don't expect to see. I also see a lot of good things, and I see a lot of potential out there. One of the young men I work with, he was mathematically very gifted, and part of what needed to happen to unlock that talent was someone believing in him and encouraging him to pursue that. I'm not very good at math, and I admire anybody who is, but here's a talent that might be lost if someone's not encouraging him. So I certainly would ask you to consider those places to be involved. I'm an alumnus of high school here in Greensboro, so I get involved in activities at Dudley as much as I can as a mentor. That's the place that pointed me in the right direction. So I like to give back to the school that gave so much to me.
Thank you.
As some of you might know, I was adopted, so adoption is one of my passions. I'm on the board of the Children's Home Society. I'm also on the board of the Repertory Company, and if there are some of you in here who are interested in the arts, that's an organization you might want to check out. I hate to be repetitive, but I'm a big fan of Big Brothers Big Sisters. I'm on the board in Forsyth County, and I've been affiliated with the organization since 1995. And my little sister, we were matched when she was 7 years old. She is now at NYU. She graduated from Salem College in May. She's now at NYU in graduate school getting a degree in art and politics. Just returned from China and is planning to go to Japan in April. So you can see I'm very proud of Courtney, and she may talk about, how I may have impacted her life, but I can honestly say that she has enriched my life. me a better person, and she has taught me a lot about young people, and she, helped me get on Facebook. I mean, that's just one of the little things that she has done, but I challenge all of you to consider mentoring. You can really make a difference in the life of a child, and all it takes is 1 hour a week, just 1 hour a week with a child. Just reading to a child, walking with them in the park, taking them to the movies, just spending time, you can make a world of difference.
So I'm an active member of the Triad Association of Black Journalists. One of my things as a is ensuring that there are people who come after me, who come after us. So I participate in the Triad Association of Black Journalists. I'm a participant in Winston-Salem of the Winston-Salem Urban League Young Professional, and they do a lot of community service projects as well.
I wanted to leave a little time before we had to wrap up for any questions from the audience.
I have a question for Wanda. I'm interested in being a news reporter, and I want to know what type of internship undergrad.
Actually, I did not, well, the undergrad internship I did was in, was in public affairs, because it was so competitive. There were very few TV stations at the time who had internships, or if they had them, they just picked one person. But you all are at an advantage, because I think every TV station in this market has an internship program, and I urge you, if you're interested, in getting a job in media, to get an internship as soon as possible. It is competitive. You need to get in there, make contacts, learn what your passion is. You may go in thinking you want to be a reporter and may find out you want to be a producer, or you may think you want to be a producer and decide you want to be a news director. So the sooner you can get in there, make the contacts, learn what you can, the better.
Anyone else?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Justine Ryan. I'm a double major in theater and interdisciplinary studies, with a concentration in global studies and conflict resolution. I'm a graduate student from Richmond, Virginia. My question is, we talk about a lot of what we should do in the Black community in America, but do you also think, as being African Americans or being people with background, people from Africa or whatever it may be, do you think we should also cover the stories of what happens that our people at a disadvantage globally? What's going on in Nigeria, or the economic status of people in Haiti?
The short answer is absolutely. And an area that I think we can do better at, particularly in this area, there is an opportunity. More than 100 different languages are spoken in the public schools in Guilford County. We are a center for refugees and immigrants, one of the most diverse communities in North Carolina. So there are opportunities to get those voices. One of the things that I think has been missing, and we did a better job of this. I'm just going to be honest with you. We were talking about this last week. We were talking, Duke University, they had the controversy last week over the Muslim call to prayer that they were going to do from Duke Chapel, and they got threats of violence, so they backed off of doing that. I know different people have different opinions about that. It seemed pretty dramatic to me that they would do something like that, but I also understood why they were doing it. But anyway, that brought up a lot of issues about how we feel about Muslims in our own communities in light of all the things that are going on globally, in light of all the terrorism, in light of beheadings, in light of just this really inhuman violence that's going on in France and elsewhere, and certainly in Nigeria. A lot of it is Muslim on Muslim violence. So the question is, though, how do we, when we see those things, do we stereotype other people? Do we assign how we view those people, a few of those people, to all of them? And one of the things we did better after 9/11 at the News and Record is we got more Muslim voices into the newspaper, how they felt in the wake of 9/11, how they felt people were treating them in the community, things that we may not understand or misinterpret about their religion. I don't think we've done as well at that in recent years, and I think there's a danger of not getting those voices out there that we do have. We're human, and we have fears, and we have prejudices, and it's very easy to get angry, and it's also very easy to say, well, they did it to us, let's do it to them. I was talking to a gentleman, I don't want to go too long, but I was a gentleman on the phone. He didn't like what we wrote about that thing at Duke, and he said, Islam is a religion of violence. That's all it's about. And he didn't agree that Duke should be allowing Muslim students a place in the chapel even to worship or to have prayer. And I told him, I said, well, Duke is a private university. It was started by Methodists, but it is a non-denominational university. I said, do you believe in property owner rights? Do you believe in people having the right to do what they want to do on their own property? He said, well, yeah. I said, well, let them do what they want to do. I said, do you go to Duke? Do you give money to Duke? Does your tax money go to Duke? It doesn't. So I said, well, Duke should be able to do what it wants to do. And I said, why do you think Muslims are violent and inhuman? And he said, well, because they don't tolerate other religions. I said, well, think about what you just said. You're saying we shouldn't tolerate Muslims here because some Muslims don't tolerate us there. So you're saying we should respond to what we're doing that we disagree with by doing the thing we disagree with ourselves. And so part of the challenge of that is getting those voices out there so you see people as human beings. And so you don't see them as symbols, and so you don't see them as stereotypes or archetypes that we draw up in our minds. And part of the responsibility of getting those voices out there belongs to people like me, and frankly, I need to do a better job.
I think I have one more. Dr. Flukes.
Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Carmen Lucas. I teach sociology here at Bennett. Sorry, some of us were in the meeting, so I don't know if the question was asked. One of the fundamental issues I have with my students when we're looking at modern day civil rights issues and just introduction to sociology is that they don't read. They may not read a newspaper, or they may not read it on the internet, and they may know something about an issue if it was posted on Facebook or tweet, but not necessarily reading the full information or some information from different sources in the media, newspapers or the news, because some of them, you hear also responses to news are listening to read the news and listening to news is depressing. With this post-millennial viewpoint of how to get information about issues, not just civil rights issues.
Well, I think what and you hear it all the time, we drive people to our website. I mean, you will probably hear WXII12.com 100 times on a given day, because we know that that's what young people are doing. They're online. We're losing young viewers, and so we're trying to get them back, and that's one way we try to do that. As far as the issue of reading, I share your concern. I had a discussion with a young lady probably 4 or 5 months ago, very intelligent, smart woman, and she actually said, I don't like traditional news. I prefer news from a casual source. And casual meaning Facebook or, The Daily Show or whatever. And those are fine tools for what they are, but that's not where you need to get your source of information. As Alan alluded to earlier, you really need to be reading. You need to be reading the New York Times, the Washington Post online, the Wall Street Journal. You need to be reading your local newspapers. This is your country, this is your world. And if you're uninformed, then you can't control your destiny, and there are just a lot of decisions that are being made on the political level, and if you're not informed, then you can't do anything about it. So be informed, be passionate, care about what's happening in your community.
And I think that's a challenge to us too. People do tend to get their news because somebody posted it on Facebook or somebody tweeted it out, and younger people haven't grown up with that tradition. People in my generation and older grew up reading the newspaper in their hand, and that doesn't necessarily happen. And I share Wanda's concern about ensuring that if you want to participate in democracy, you have to do so as an informed citizen. And the only way that you do that is to consume both national news and local news and critically think about the issues. And the only way that you can critically think about it is that you have the information, you have the facts, and think about the sources that you're getting those facts from.
Well, I would disagree with you just a little bit. My students, I think they read. I just don't think they read my stuff. They read. I'm guessing all of you out there, you read, and you read a lot. I think the problem I have is some of the places you go to read what you read. But I think there's a voracious appetite out there, and I think part of the responsibility is ours. Part of what we have needed to do and haven't done it as fast enough is to change with the times in going to where the readers are and communicating with them in a way that is relevant and interesting to them. That doesn't mean you dumb down the news. It doesn't mean that you make it better than what it ought to be, but it means you present it in a different form. We do a lot more stories with links and video, and we also do a lot of material content now. I know we do it at the Journal is our sister newspaper now. We do it at the Journal and the News and Record, where we're going to cell phone platforms and tablet platforms to be where the readers are. So I think the information is still very important, but we compelling, and we have to take that into where you are, and we also have to cover things that you care about. I was talking about those blind spots earlier. There are some things you need to know, but there are also some things as a media person I need to know that you care about that I'm not covering. And so I think that's a two-way street. I do encourage you to read more and to read good writing, particularly if you want to go into media, you need to read good writing, whether it's broadcast or online or print. To be a good journalist, you need to be able to write, and you need to know what good writing is, and you need to learn to appreciate it. But again, I think part of the responsibility is mine as a journalist to go to where you are, bring you in. I'm not saying there isn't still some work you need to do on your part, but there's work I need to do on my part as well.
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you guys for coming out today. This will wrap up today's program. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McLean to give us the benediction.
Let us start that in prayer. Dear Lord, how precious is our time we share together. How brighter is our path because of the words we have heard from our speakers. As generations have passed the baton of leadership, so each of us in this sacred intersection of time and eternity have a great responsibility to be active. May we abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Our eyes remain sensitive to the condition of the oppressed and marginalized. May our hearts ache to make a positive impact as they are softened towards the needs of the least of them. May the purity of our motives draw others to join us in our journey toward liberation. In all of our interactions with help us to be as Jesus admonished his disciples, sending you out as sheep among wolves. Be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. In all we imagine, attempt, and achieve, help us to know and do your will. You require justice, oceans of it, and fairness that flows like a mighty river. With your help, dear Lord, we commit ourselves to this challenge. Amen.
Amen.
Have a motion.
It's good to see you in person.
Good to see you too. It's been a while.
How you doing, Alan? I'm doing great.
Thank you guys so much.
Good to see you.
If you have